So we have made a lot of progress in this course. I wrote a lot of programs, and I'm sure you have already run into a lot of errors. Errors are an inevitable part of programming. So one thing you need to take away from this course is the mindset that no matter how good you are, your program will fail at a certain point. And this may not be your issue. You can think about all the possible scenarios and create the best world class code. Still, there will be things that you are unexpected of. So for this reason, we need a mechanism that can gracefully handle exceptions, even though we do not know what exception may happen. An exception is an object that is generated as a result of an error or unexpected event. They are said to be thrown. It's like throwing out an exception from somewhere. It's programmer's responsibility to write code that detects and handles exception. An unhandled exception will crash a program. We already seen this bad array before, but just show this again. You can see that this array is a 3-element array, and we are using an I less than equals to 3 here. Apparently, there's a failure. Oops. There's an error. And the error says array index out of bounds exception. So one thing to note, this is an exception. And this is a particular type of exception, which is array index out of bound. Now, this is an example of an exception that we may be handling. Java allows you to create exception handlers to handle the exception. Exception handler is a section of code that can gracefully respond to exceptions. We're not saying that the Java exception handler will remove all exceptions. This is not possible. Instead, it will gracefully respond if index is out of bound, if there's no file or whatever it happens, or no memory. At least you need to report it and make sure your other part of code are not affected. The process of intercepting and responding to exception is called exception handling. The default exception handler deals with unhandled exceptions, and the default exception handler prints an error message and crash the program. And basically, this is what the JVM does. The default exception handler eventually will put the responsibility on the JVM's hand. If anywhere an exception is thrown, either by a out of bound index or by a missing file or by lack of memory, somewhere in your program, you need to catch it. If you don't catch that, it will go through all the call methods and eventually goes to main method, then goes to JVM. An exception is an object. Exception objects are created from classes in the Java API hierarchy or exception classes. So all the exception classes in hierarchy are derived from throwable. There are two most useful classes, error and exception. Errors are for exceptions that are thrown when critical error, like an internal error in the Java virtual machine. This is outside our control or running out of memory. Application should not try to handle errors because they are a result of a serious condition. Rather, you should just possibly handle it. Rather, you will pass this to whoever is running the program to diagnose this and remove the error. But for instances of classes that derive from exception class, programmers, we should handle the exception. So and the object, we have throwable, and throwable, we have error, which you should not handle, and the exception. There are multiple different exceptions, like runtime exception, IO exception, array index out of range bound exception. Inside the IO exception, there may be file not found or end of file. To handle exception, you use this try and catch. And in the try, you follow with a block statement. You will run the block statement. If any error happens, any exception happens in the block statement, the catch phrase statement will try to catch the specific type of exception and execute the statements inside this catch block. So the first keyword try indicate a block of code will be attempted. And remember, curly braces are required in both try and catch. This is not like a loop or if statement. You have to have curly braces. So in the try block, you have one more statements that are executed and can potentially throw an exception. These are pretty much the main workflow of your code. It's basically the array code we have been written so far. Those are the programming logics that is supposed to work on the application to resolve the issue. And this code will not halt if the try block throws an exception. In fact, once the try block throws an exception, you will have the catch clause. A catch clause begins with the keyword catch, and followed in the parentheses, you will have the exception type. The code that immediately follows the catch is known as a catch block, which requires a curly brace. The code in the catch block is executed if the try block throws an exception of that exception type. Remember this, the catch block is executed if the try block throws an exception that is of that exception type. The code, for example, when you are trying to open the file, what if the file does not exist? And previously, you already see when I type in some file name, if I make a typo and the file doesn't exist, I get a wrong file name, then JVM will print out a bunch of red notes, red message saying that the file not found. Instead of letting JVM handle that and crash the program, application will stop there. We can catch the exception ourselves, print out something, and then after exception, the program will continue at the point past the catch block. So let's look at the open file. In the open file, you have this try and catch, right? If I do not have this catch block, they will just, or I should say, if I don't have the try and catch, if I only have this part and the file is not found, what will happen? Let me copy this over here and let me run this. Because I need to handle this file, not exception. Remember, we need to throws. All right, now let's run it. And I'm request to enter a file. I'll just put 123.456. There's no such file, right? Now, this is the default behavior, which is happening here. The default behavior is printing out this red message and crash the program. The program terminates here. And as you can see, if I have code followed, then those code will not be executed. However, once I have this try, and now I run it, and I'm entering 231, that doesn't matter, 456, okay. This time, instead of crashing the program, I actually get a message, and when I click OK, the execution goes here, done. This done was never executed when I have the file opening statement outside of try, right? But this time it is executed, which means after the try block and catch block, after exception is handled, I can still finish whatever is after the try catch block. So if I do not have try and catch block, this part will never be executed. The program will halt it, will crash and halt it halfway at the point where the error happens. But because I have a try and error, try and catch statement will catch block will be executed. Once catch statement is executed, the code following the try catch block will still get executed. We'll handle this gracefully if you have other files opened, or if you have other windows opened, you still have the opportunity to close them so that you will not interrupt other flows. Or if you are running in a larger program, your block may be failing, but other modules may not be failing. Then by exiting, you are not crashing the whole application. Rather, you are just giving an error message telling them something's wrong. This happens a lot. For example, if you have a Word document, I'm sure you run into those error message before, that you are trying to open a file and this file has corrupted. Instead of crashing the whole Word application, the Word will actually give you a notification saying this file is not openable. So these are the things you can do to handle the exception, so that your application have a more graceful workflow. And each exception object has a method called getMessage that can be used to retrieve a default error message. We already print out the error message when we already see the error message when we have the open file outside, right? We see the red lines, which are the error message. We can also get error message from the exception. Note here, this is a file not found exception, and the object is called E. E is the file not found exception, and you can get error message from this object instance E. E is the instance of the exception. Let's see the exception error, exception error message. So here you can print out E.get error message, get message. Let's run again. I'll just put 1, 2, 3. Which failed, and the error message says the system cannot find the file specified. This is the error. This is the error message. So and it's apparently more clearer than what it was there. And now that we have the done, same as before. So basically, you can use a try and catch statement to wrap your statement inside. To wrap your program workflow inside the try block. If there's any exception, you can use your catch to handle gracefully instead of crashing the whole application. And this exception is the object instance itself, which has properties such as method such as get error message, get message.